Hello there ladies and gentlemen, TX141 here, also known as Paul, bringing you another Ace in a Day gameplay for the arcade mode of War Thunder. In today's instalment, I shall be reviewing the Bayerische Flugzeugwerke 109 ML3, also known in English as the Messerschmitt 109 E-3. Having already provided a historical overview to the ML variant of the 109 in general, which may be seen using the link in the top right corner of your screen, as displayed now, let us divulge into the history of the ML3. Following the arrival of the ML1 type by the end of 1938, early 1939, it was found that for all the success in terms of performance of this plane, its armament was lacking due to the fact that burst mass was only comprised of 4 7.92mm machine guns. As a result, the intention during the course of 1939 was to increase this burst mass by switching in a 20mm cannon or two. The first prototype to attempt this was BF109 V17. Essentially what would have been an ML2 or an ML3 prototype fielding the same 4 7.92mm machine gun layout, but the addition of a 20mm MG-FF-M cannon mounted in the crank housing of a new Daimler-Benz 601 AA engine. This was an inline engine providing 1020 horsepower. Test flights during the summer of 1939 showed that the cannon mounted in the crank housing suffered from overheating, seizing and vibrational difficulties, making it very difficult to aim onto target. As a result, this prototype was scrapped, and a follow-up prototype, BF109 V20, was introduced as an intended prototype for the future 109 E2 variant. This plane was to see the two wing-mounted 7.92mm machine guns being scrapped in favour of two 20mm MG-FF cannons and an additional 20mm MG-FF cannon being based in the crank housing of the engine, the same newly upgraded engine as the V17 prototype. In reality, this did not pay off, once again due to vibrational difficulties in that crankhoused cannon. As a result, this prototype was scrapped and one last modification was made to the prototypes. Instead of having the 4 7.92mm machine guns, it was opted that two 7.92mm MG17 machine guns would be based above the engine, and two 20mm MG-FF cannons would be based in the wings. As a result, this plane was liked and the design was put forward and through for the ML3. Ergo, this new Messerschmitt 109 ML3 was put into production by the end of 1939, rolling off the assembly lines just before the start of 1940 and into combat service by the early stages of 1940. Pilots liked the increase of the burst mass and the additional performance that the new engine provided. And as well as taking part in the phony war, the ML3 was to have its most significant contribution during the Battle of Britain from July to October of 1940, going up against its true equal in the Supermarine Spitfire Mark I. Pilots both contemporary to the battle and modern historians all agree that both planes were equal to one another, and really it was down to situational awareness and the situations which the pilots found themselves in as to who would be the better in the battle. Of course, whilst the Spitfire had the better turn circle, it lacked the dive ability of the ML3. And so, the ML3 goes down in history as the plane which took the fight to the Spitfire in one of the biggest confrontations of the Second World War. The ML3 was to be phased out by the end of the Battle of Britain for the ML4, due to field conversion and changing of assembly lines. With that being said, how exactly does the ML3 go down in War Thunder? Well, in this airfield domination game on the map Berlin, we're going to see that the ML3 is essentially a continuation of the ML1, at a higher battle rating and with a new armament layout. Instead of the 4 7.92mm machine guns, which were very lackluster as I demonstrated in my previous review, the ML3's addition of two 20mm MG-FF cannons in the wings means that you have a much more significant punch, albeit a bit of an unreliable one, but we will come on to that very shortly. The setup I am using, as depicted here, is as follows. 250 metre gun convergence with the following belt types: omni-purpose for the machine guns and air targets for the cannons. The reason for the 250 metre gun convergence, as will be depicted time and time again in this review, is that I intend to get as close as possible before hitting my opponents, thanks to the mounting of the cannons in the wings, and therefore I want to have them at full effectiveness at convergence. Of course the question would be, why do I not have a wider convergence, especially if I'm going to be using this plane in a boom and zoom categorical role? Well, we'll go into that shortly. The reason for the omni-purpose ammunition in the 7.92mm machine guns is thanks to the fact that this is the belt which has the most contribution of incendiary rounds and some tracers which will allow me to see where my shots are going and hopefully set fuel tanks on fire where appropriate, thanks to a couple of armour piercing rounds also being present within that belt. Meanwhile, for the 20mm cannons, the air target belt is being used simply because that is the one with the highest concentration of FIT rounds. I have found that whilst the armour piercing high explosives, as found in the stealth belt, are incredibly effective if they hit a critical point such as an engine, they are by no means as effective at getting pilot kills or causing significant overall damage to the main fuselage on a standard burst, by comparison with the FIT rounds. The FITs are not high explosive in nature essentially, however because they fragment and therefore kick off shrapnel from what I've seen in game, it means that you get a more all-round damage effect on your target. Of course, to add to this we have our standard 30-minute fuel load in order to make it to the end of a game if needed. And now let us go into some specifics. So thus far we have seen that I've been using the plane in much like the role of the ML1, attacking from a slight altitude advantage, building up speed and giving it a burst to the guns at close range. However, there is a problem here. The 20mm cannons have very little ammunition, 120 rounds in total with 60 rounds per gun. As a result, you've got to make your shots count. What's more, the muzzle velocity of the two 20mm cannons is quite low, and this means a lot of the time you're going to have to give not only significant lead in addition to the lead indicator provided, but a little more than what you might expect. So, from time to time your passes will seem to have little to no effect on your opponent, just because the 20mm cannon rounds never seem to get onto target, and there are a couple of instances in this game where this occurs. As I split S around to try and hit a new target, I note a Spitfire on the runway, but then I realise there's this Yak 1 trying to brake round. And straight away, I completely miss on my burst, and so I just decide to break away thanks to the performance advantage I've had from coming from a higher altitude. I then loop round to come back onto this Yak 1, who's trying to chase off a friendly Junkers 87 from the airfield B. A Spitfire Mark 1 also brakes around and I change targets, because they're coming directly towards me, and I decide to take them out, achieving my ace. As we can see there, the 20mm cannon rounds went to good effect, in combination with the 7.92mm shots, which essentially allow you to line up your target and see where your shots are going. However, due to the fact it's quite hard to get the 20mm rounds onto target, there can be a level of frustration, and that is why I have the 250m gun convergence. I want to bring my cannon rounds in at the last possible moment before I could possibly crash into my opponent. I want to get the full effectiveness out of them, rather than try and use them at a longer range, such as 500 meters, and find myself missing a lot of the shots, because reloads are going to be frequent in this plane. However, to offset this, what about the performance of the aircraft? Well, with the boost of the engine as I achieved my 6th kill on a Heinkel 112 V5, because of the uprating of the engine to the new Daimler-Benz 601 AA engine, you will find that by comparison with the E1, this plane climbs a little bit better and seems to just pick up speed a little bit more on the level. You have the same overall performance in terms of your roll rate, which locks up beyond 500 km an hour, and you have the same standard turn circle. And really at this battle rating of 3.0, there are some planes you can outturn, such as the Messerschmitt 109 F1, the Focke-Wulf 190 A1, and I believe, perhaps even on occasion, the Yakovlev Yak 9T. Although this is more of a situational outturning situation, because on occasion Yak 9Ts have been able to outturn me and vice versa, depending on the speeds, the altitudes and the positioning of the relative aircraft, so do not always quote me on that one. At the same time, you will not be able to outturn aircraft such as the KI-61, the Spitfire Mark 1 and Spitfire Mark 2, or indeed the American Hellcat. So, this means that really you do have to stick to an energetic style of play unless you distinctly know an opponent who is unable to really turn fight by comparison with this aircraft. As I dive down a Yak 1 and an enemy Spitfire Mark 1A, I can't decide on my target, and so I decide to run away, utilising the higher performance of my engine in order to pull distance. And then notice an enemy Hurricane harassing the Junkers 87, I line up my shot, but as you can see there, I can't get any of my 20mm rounds onto target, and that is a prime example of the frustration you may feel with this plane, simply because I gave enough lead, but I didn't give enough to make sure to compensate for the muzzle velocity of the cannons. Nonetheless, returning to the overall performance of this plane by comparison with its contemporaries. Sorry for the fireworks outside, we're heading towards bonfire night. Because this is not a turn fighter, it's more of an energy fighter, you will have to expect to perform a lot of Immelmans and split S's. This plane, thanks to its decent roll rate, as I've said, and its great elevator response, allows you to perform those manoeuvres very effectively. What's more, this plane seems to perform very well between speeds of 350 to 500 km an hour. Speeds below this will actually compromise your performance completely. You will actually find that your performance drops off at 250 km an hour, and the plane seems to hang in the air very limp as it tries to build up speed once again. Moreover, the best altitude to play this plane at, in my opinion, is roughly 3,000 meters or higher. The higher you go in this aircraft, and I've taken this plane up to 7,000 meters for the purposes of bomber hunting, I have found that this plane gets better with altitude. However, since most of the dogfights at a battle rating of 3.0 occur in the 3,000 to 5,000 meters range or less, of course if there are furballs down low, you're going to find that sticking to altitudes of 3,000 to 5,000 meters will be the most ideal. And as we break away, we can see that despite being an airfield domination game whereby we've not really encroached above 1,500 meters altitude, every time we're stuck to our mantra of get in and get out, do not stay and hope to achieve kills from just a succession of turn fights. And now we're going to utilise our rather good climb rate, although it is not the best at your battle rating. That crown goes to the Messerschmitt 19 F1, or perhaps indeed the Spitfire Mark 1 and Mark 2. We can see that we can climb up to this PBY-5 Catalina quite quickly, and although we're popping holes into it thanks to our 20mm cannon rounds, we cannot actually take it down in time, so we're having to use our machine gun now to try and take out that left-hand engine, something which I'm afraid I am unable to achieve by the end of this game, as I begin to put my shots into the engine as the game comes to its end. And with that being said, let's just take a look at some post-game stats. Upon reflection, we can see that our 7 kills and single assist allowed us to earn 10,406 silver lions. On top of this, we earned 999 research points, with 300 going towards our research on the ME163. We conclude this review of the ML3 by realising it is much the same as the ML1 in most regards, possessing a very powerful rudder, decent elevator response, a high roll rate, although not the best, pertaining up to 500 km an hour speed, and great performance at speeds of 350 to 500 km an hour. What's more, this plane has a decent climb rate and seems to perform better and better with altitude, and sticking to an altitude range of 3,000 to 5,000 meters will complement this aircraft quite nicely. However, on top of the E1, you also have the addition of 2 20mm MGFF cannons in the wings, and these are absolutely deadly if employed onto target accurately. In order to achieve this and avoid unreliable passes as depicted in this video, you will need to get close and provide additional lead to that you would normally give, simply because the cannons seem to have a lower muzzle velocity than you would normally anticipate. What is also important to note is that at a battle rating of 3.0, this plane no longer possesses the champion role of an energy fighter. This is distributed amongst other fighter types such as the Messerschmitt 19 F1, the Focke-Wulf 190 A1 and the P-39 Aerocobra, along with the P-47 Thunderbolt. All of these planes will be able to outmatch you in a certain regard, whether it's speed on the level or climb rate. However, none of them will be able to match your tenacity for versatility, and if you ever need to, you can always mix it up with them in a turn fight because you possess the best turn circle of them all. And we can see by comparison to the rest of our team, we came second in an airfield domination game whereby we never went above 2,000 meters altitude for a good portion of the match. As a result, we played against the strengths of this aircraft, but stuck to an energy roll nonetheless, and we pulled it off with aplomb. One final note to make about the ML3 is that its durability is reasonable, although there is not too much armour, and as a result, getting hit by a succession of 20mm cannon rounds or a significant burst of 12.7mm machine gun fire will quickly dispatch your plane, and so I always advise being extra cautious, especially now that the armament of planes at your battle rating has significantly increased. However, for those looking to learn the ins and outs of energy fighting and the virtue of patience, especially when trying to get shots onto target, the ML3 is the fighter for you. And so I've been TX141, and if you've enjoyed this video, why not leave a like, comment or subscribe for future War Thunder videos on my channel. But until next time, ladies and gentlemen, take care and good luck in the skies.